Welcome to the series of talks that aims to delve into Sri Aurobindo's profound insight, spirituality is indeed the master key of the Indian mind. Featuring a diverse range of speakers who have extensively researched in this topic, the series will explore the manifestation of spirituality across various fields of life. A new talk will be released every third Saturday by Sri Aurobindo Center for Advanced Research in collaboration with Brhat. This week's speaker is Dr. Anurag Shukla, Director, Policy Education at Brhat. Dr. Anurag is a doctorate from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He is a recipient of prestigious fellowships such as JPAL and Star Scholars Program. His research interests include the discourse technology in education, history of education, decolonizing education, arts and culture, and the civilizational heritage of India.
Namaste everyone, and welcome to this session on spirituality and education from Sri Aurobindo's perspective. We'll be going deeper into various aspects of spirituality and why spirituality is important for education. Why do we need to infuse spirituality in every aspect of education? But before doing that, we will do a very small exercise. This exercise is going to be about thinking over 3 questions. These are very critical questions that will give us direction into this session as well. So I invite you to take a moment, take a deep breath, close your eyes if you will, and ask yourself these 3 important questions. And we will be thinking about these questions for 2 minutes after closing our eyes. And the questions and 3 questions are: the first one, what is education? What is the true purpose of education? And the second question is education just about acquiring degrees, passing exams, or getting jobs? And the third question is it about something deeper, about discovering who we are, why we are here? So before we close our eyes and think over these 3 critical questions, let me repeat these questions again. So the first question over which you're going to think about is, what is education? The second question, is it just about acquiring degrees, passing exams, or getting jobs? Or is it about something deeper, about discovering who we are and why we are here? So take 2 minutes, think over these questions carefully, and then we will come back and we will discuss why do we need spirituality in education. So let's start now. I hope all of you have thought over these questions, and I'm also sure that there are not going to be single answer for these questions. We all have different conceptions around education. We have different ideas around education. What we feel is the purpose of education. So we will have different ideas around this. But if we just go by what modern world tells us, so modern world tells us that education is all about competition, success, and financial security. We have seen this in our newspapers as well, that every every single year around April and May, we have newspapers telling us that these many students have topped board exams or IIT exams or medical exams, and we have so many coaching centers being run across India uh, just for the purpose of making a student pass these highly competitive exams. So all of us are competing with each other to get into these institutions, to get into IITs, to get into AIMS, to get into other top institutions of India. So education all has been all about competing with each other, succeeding against each other to 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 reach to these most coveted places. But there was a time when education was not about competition, success, or financial security. It was not about uh, how well we are doing financially in our lives. It was not about going to quota, preparing for an exam, ace that exam, and then get into IITs, get into some again after IITs, prepare for IIMs, get into IIMs, get a job, work with the corporates, and still be unsatisfied, still be unhappy with your lives. So there was a time when education was about self-realization, inner awakening, and the unfolding of human potential. And we are going to embark on this journey today, a journey through history, philosophy, and self-inquiry to rediscover the lost purpose of education. The purpose which we have lost in the last few decades. Uh, since our independence, we have been struggling with the kind of education we want for our kids. We have seen how students who go to places like Kota, they now in higher numbers they commit suicide. We have similar things happening in our IITs, in our IIMs. We have now studies telling us that almost every second student in US campuses is facing mental health crisis or going through depression. So all of these are the examples of the lost purpose of education. So we have somewhere lost the way. We are now competing with each other. We are trying to succeed against each other. That that for that financial security, which is not going to be realized, which we always trying to catch up with, and we will try to compare this condition to the condition we had maybe in pre-colonial India, maybe the kind of education we used to have in the past, and also the kind of education that Sri Aurobindo proposes in his scheme of things. And this is where we will step into the wisdom of Sri Aurobindo, who is a seer, who is a yogi, a philosopher, and a revolutionary, who did not just talk about education, he envisioned a complete transformation of learning as a sacred path to higher consciousness. Like Swami Vivekananda, even though they never met, Sri Aurobindo talks about how he had a dream about Swami Vivekananda, and he learned important lessons from him in that dream. And Swami Vivekananda also talks about life being a journey about traveling from one level of consciousness to higher level of consciousness. And similarly, for Sri Aurobindo, the learning is all about reaching to that higher consciousness. So it is not just about material success or getting into a corporate job or high paying job, but about getting that delight, Satchit Ananda in your life, which is incomparable to any material worth in any material success in our lives. Also, I'm not going to give a lecture here because the topic is so profound, and I don't see that I'm capable enough to deliver a lecture on spirituality and education from Sri Aurobindo's perspective. It is going to be a discussion. It is going to be a dialogue. It is an invitation. It is an invitation to see education as a path to self-discovery, to reconnect learning with the spirit, and to rethink the very foundation of knowledge. But before we understand Sri Aurobindo's vision, let us first ask, how did we lose the essence of education? And this moment, let's imagine a scene from India's past. A young boy sits under the shade of an ancient banyan tree, surrounded by the stillness of the forest. His guru, a wise sage, speaks of the interconnectedness of all life, of dharma, of cosmic laws, of the meaning of existence. There are no rigid textbooks, no mechanical exams. Education here is an organic, living process, a journey of the soul. And this is how education used to be delivered in India. And we have Dharmpalji writing about pre-colonial education in India and saying that every single village in India used to have schools. And this data, which has been collected by British officers themselves, and then sent back for the purpose of sending it back to their superior authorities in Britain, back in Britain. So we have Munro from Madras Presidency, we have Adams' report, we have several other colonial officers writing about how there was a thriving system of education, native system of education in India, which was completely destroyed, uprooted by the Britishers, and instead of that, they imposed a colonial system of education on us. So education, which was an organic living process, was completely uprooted, completely destroyed. And now, fast forward to colonial India. A different boy sits in a British-style school in Calcutta. He is made to memorize the laws of British governance, European history, and Shakespeare. He is taught that his own civilization is backward, that his own knowledge traditions are outdated. He is trained not to think freely, but to obey, to serve, to fit into a system designed by others. And this is very much the case even in post-independence India. We have just borrowed these ideas from the colonial education system, and we have not done any reform with the kind of education we used to have in colonial times. So we still have an education which is not designed to make us think freely, but to obey, to serve, to fit into a system which is again designed by the others. And this transformation from education being an organic living process to a system which makes us to obey, to serve, this transformation was not accidental. This was very deliberate. The British understood that education is the most powerful tool to shape a civilization. Whether you want to break a civilization or make a civilization, you have to interfere. If you want to do that, you have to interfere with the education system there. And that's why before imposing their own education system, their own governance system, the British first destroyed the native system of education in India. By breaking India's ancient Gurukul system and replacing it with a Western model, they created generations of Indians who were educated but disconnected from their own cultural and spiritual heritage. And like Sri Aurobindo says, the spirituality for a country like India, the spirituality is the soul. So if you disconnect a nation from its soul, you have actually made that nation a dead entity. And Sri Aurobindo talks about this in his works as well. In one of his essays, he says, and I quote, "The present system of education," and here he is talking about the colonial education system, and also this is very much applicable to even the modern education system which we have even today. And again, I quote him, and he says, "The present system of education is calculated to repress and even destroy the originality, the thinking power, the intellectual and moral strength of the nation, because the modern education or the colonial education system is designed to kill the soul of a nation, and the soul of Indian nation was spirituality. So secular education, which was designed for Indian for us Indians after the imposition of colonial education system, was bereft of any spirituality. So that's how they killed education system in India, and that is where the Sri Aurobindo enters the story. And Sri Aurobindo himself was product of colonial education system. In fact, he was born into this very colonial system. His father, an admirer of British education system, sent him to England at the age of 7 to ensure that he received a modern education. For 14 years, he studied at the finest British institutions. British institutions like St. Paul's School, King's College, Cambridge. And he excelled at it. He mastered Greek, Latin, French, and English literature, preparing for a life in the British civil service. Yet, despite all this brilliance, something was missing. Sri Aurobindo realized that his education had taught him about everything except his own civilization. He had read Shakespeare, but not Kalidas. He knew European philosophy, but not Vedanta. He could analyze the French Revolution, but knew nothing of the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, or the great intellectual traditions of India. And Sri Aurobindo says in one of his essays, after returning to India, that the education I received in England, again I'm quoting him directly from his essays, and he says there, the education I received in England gave me everything except the knowledge of my own civilization. So the soul was completely missing in that education. And when he returned to India, he began reading Sanskrit texts, engaging with yogis, immersing himself in the spiritual traditions of the land. And this was his great realization. And again, I quote him, "A nation's soul resides in its education. If you wish to uplift a nation, uplift its education first." And that's why there is so much emphasis on education in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. And this realization led him to redefine what true education meant. He saw that education should not just train the intellect, it should awaken the soul. That's why spirituality in education is necessary, is an integral part of education. And Sri Aurobindo did not just critique colonial education, he saw the fundamental flaws in modern education itself. Even after independence, India retained the same westernized system that British had imposed. Now let us take a moment and discuss what is wrong with modern education. Again, when Sri Aurobindo discussed this, he was talking about colonial education system. But we have in modern India have retained the most aspects of colonial education system as our modern education system. And the first defect which Sri Aurobindo discusses about colonial education, which is also applicable for modern education, is that It trains the intellect, but it neglects the soul. So students, they learn facts, but not wisdom. And this is where we see a crisis erupting in India. So we have institutions like NASCOM telling us that almost 90% of our engineers in India are unemployable. So they have been so these students have been merely learning the facts, but not the wisdom of their trade, not wisdom of their discipline. And this case is not much different in other disciplines as well. Humanities and social sciences in India are still very much colonized. They don't make us to think freely. We are still very much tied up with Western systems of thought. We still borrow a lot from Western thinkers like Foucault, Bourdieu, Derrida. All those have become part and parcel of our humanities and social science discipline. But we were not taught anything about our own Indian original thinkers from the past. And that's why we have been merely learning them as facts, not gaining any wisdom out of it. And we also see this happening even in disciplines like mathematics. For example, even there we have this tendency to memorize equations, but we don't understand the rhythm of the universe. So those equations do not help us in our daily lives. So again, modern education system in India and everywhere else, it trains the intellect but neglects the soul. So also the spirituality part is completely missing from it. Not just that, the second defects which Sri Aurobindo finds with modern education and colonial education is that it separates knowledge from life. Even though it teaches math, science, and history, but not how to live, how to think, how to know oneself. And that's why we see several crises happening across learning and educational institutions in India and abroad. Because we have all the knowledge of the world now. We have those knowledge available to us at fingertips. Uh, we are now producing more mathematicians than ever in the past. We are now producing more uh, scientists now uh, than ever in the past. More historians now ever in the past. But now we have more and more fault lines. Our campuses are deeply ideologically divided. People are not willing to talk to each other. There is no dialogue happening uh, between different philosophies, different ideologies. We have completely lost out on how to live, how to think, how to know oneself. So our knowledge, our education has become completely separated from our lives. So, so two major defects which Sri Aurobindo identifies. That first is that it trains the intellect but neglects the soul, and the second is that it separates knowledge from life. And the third very important defect which Sri Aurobindo identified was that it produces followers, not thinkers. So all our education has been about producing the copycats, the mimics, who would just follow the order, who are not original thinkers or creators. And education today, as well as in colonial India, was designed to create efficient employees, the clerks, not awakened human beings, original thinkers or creators. And we are still very much continuing with that kind of education. We are still very much so even though we have Indians are now CEOs everywhere. So all the top IT companies, you just go through the name of CEOs, you will invariably found Indians there. But why Indians are not creating something? For example, even though we Indians have been running Google, but Indians could not produce something like Google. Not just Google. For example, a tiny country like Japan has been producing Nobel Prize winner after year, like year after year. Uh, but in India, we hardly have any, even the Nobel Prize winner which we have produced. Many Indians who they have gone abroad, uh, did most of their work in institutions abroad, and then they have received the Nobel Prize. So, what is lacking in India that we have not been able to produce original thinkers, creators, inventors, but just efficient employees or clerks? The fault lies with the kind of education we have. The colonial education system, we have borrowed most of our modern education system from colonial education system, and there is an immediate need to reform that. And no one but Sri Aurobindo has the best explanation for this, and also the best critique of this, and the best, and if anyone can explain this in a much profounder manner, it is Sri Aurobindo. And he characterizes the modern education system or colonial education system merely as a heterogeneous jumble of mainly useless information. So for him, this modern education is nothing but a heterogeneous jumble of mainly useless information. So we just learn facts and reproduce them as it is in our examinations, and then we forget about them. So we have learned so much in our schools in grade 8, 9, 10th, 11, 12. Most of the knowledge which we received in those grades is now not relevant for us, not useful for us. And most of us have actually forgotten about that. So schooling, education, learning has been all about learning these heterogeneous jumble of merely useless information. And what it does, then it produces tame parrots. So it has been training. So Sri Aurobindo also characterizes education as a training of tame parrots who live in a cage and talk of the joys of the forest. So all of us have become these tamed parrots. So we have been tamed by modern education system. So we only know how to follow the orders. We only know how to become efficient employees, but not original thinkers. We don't want to take that risk. So now we know the defects of modern education system, that it trains the intellect but neglects the soul. There's whole spirituality missing from it. It separates the knowledge from life. It produces followers, not thinkers. And after knowing the defects, we now we should be thinking about the alternative. So what is the alternative? And what does education look like when it becomes a path to higher consciousness, like Sri Aurobindo has been talking about, or Swami Vivekananda has been talking about? And Sri Aurobindo himself provide a path forward in form of his integral education. And his integral education is a system that develops the whole human being. And unlike modern education system, which focuses on the mental aspect of education, cognitive part of it, the education, the integral education proposed by Sri Aurobindo, it focuses on all five dimensions of human being: the physical, the vital, the mental, the psychic, and the spiritual. In modern education system, we have seen how there is an overemphasis on the mental part. So we learn a lot of facts. We have to memorize them. We have to reproduce them as it is in our examinations. Get good marks. Then again, prepare for examinations like NEET, JEE. Get into IITs, medical institutions. Again, train ourselves for exams like CAT, MAT, GMAT. There are so many exams happening, and everywhere we have to memorize certain facts, certain schemas, certain models, and reproduce them as it is in our exams. There has been a lot of overemphasis actually on mental part of our being, but other parts are completely missing from education. Even physical part is now increasingly missing. So now most of the times we are either on our laptops or our mobile devices. Our minds are now overstimulated. Our bodies are understimulated, and that drives us towards a very narrow, one-dimensional idea, vision of education. and this is where the modern education system has been producing a lot of crises, mental health crisis, physical crisis. We are now there are now lifestyle disease burden. So all that because the education which we have been receiving in our schools, in our colleges, in our universities has been one dimensional. It has been just focusing on the cognitive aspect of it, mental aspect of it. Not even they are fully. For example, the mental aspect of education talks about cultivating intelligence, creativity, and critical thinking. But we have seen that we actually not producing intelligent beings. Our creativities are getting reduced day by day. We are not producing critical thinkers. So even though there is an overemphasis on mental aspect of education, even there we are quite failing. We are quite lacking even there. So the current education system is completely insufficient for the need of a whole human being, and that's why Sri Aurobindo proposes his alternative vision of education in form of integral education, and he says that we have to integrate all five aspects in our education, all five dimensions in our education: the physical, the vital, the mental, the psychic, and the spiritual. And the physical part is about training the body, disciplining ourselves, mastery of the senses. In our modern society, we have become consumers. We hardly have any control over our senses. Our bodies are getting fatter and fatter. We are indisciplined, and this is because this physical dimension of education is completely missing from our education. Vital part is about developing emotions, resilience, and willpower. Again, in Gen Z, we see these qualities completely missing. We hardly have any control over our emotions. We react to the things. We quickly make decisions which sometimes turn out to be very disastrous for us. We are hardly resilient now. We hardly have any willpower left within us. So even the vital part is very much missing in our modern education system. And Sri Aurobindo says that only when we start reorienting education towards integrating all these five aspects, we will have much more holistic human being produced by our education system. So physical, vital, and the mental. Even though the modern education is all about focusing on the mental part, uh, there are intelligence theories, there are creativity theories, there are critical thinking theories, but they have not been actually producing any grand intelligence or creativity or critical thinking. Even there, we have been talking about how we are now becoming more unintelligent, non-creative. Critical thinking is completely missing. So even though modern education seems to focus a lot on mental as education, the results have not been very positive, very productive for our civilization, for our society. And then comes psychic dimension of education, which is about finding one's true calling, one's one's sole purpose. So now people they do so many things in their lives. They're always confused. They don't know what they want to do. What is the purpose of their lives? All of us are. We are a confused generation. And this again very much comes from the kind of education we have been getting. Because education has been driving us towards earning more and more money, uh, jumping from one, hoping from one, hoping, jumping from one job to another job, uh, and but still remaining unsatisfied, unhappy, because we have not able to find what is the purpose of all these things which we have been doing. And the last most important dimension of education is the spiritual part. The secular education in the past few years, which became integral part of modern education, was completely bereft of spirituality. Awakening, which is about awakening to the divine, realizing one's higher self. So we remained at the material level, we remained satisfied with the kind of money we are making, which made us unhappy, which made us unsatisfied, discontented, disenchanted, disoriented, all that, but still we have not been able to do any reform there, and we still don't consider spirituality as an integral part of our education. And that's where Sri Aurobindo's integral education comes. Only when we have all these five dimensions included in education, we will have a whole education system presented for human beings. Only then we will be able to produce the whole human beings. Otherwise, we will keep producing the one-dimensional human beings which we saw all around us. Even we are product of such one-dimensional education system. We are also very much one-dimensional. So this is also a moment where we should pause and reflect for a while, and reflect over these questions like, does our current education system nurture these five dimensions? And the answer is clearly no. So even the mental education part is, even though there is an overemphasis on that, even there we have not been able to produce any productive results. Or the questions like, does it focus only on the mind, ignoring the soul? Again, the answer is clearly yes. So even though there has been overemphasis on mind by ignoring the soul, even uh, that has not been very holistic, has not been very right. Even the mind part, we have been missing out on several things. We have not been able to produce intelligent beings. We have not been able to produce creative beings. We have not been able to produce beings who can do critical thinking. So what is missing from our education is these very critical five dimensions of education, as well as spirituality. So we need to reorient our education system again in these very important five dimensions, a balance of it, and then see the transformation happening. And this we have to anyway do. For example, Sri Aurobindo talks about how even the future of this universe depends on how how his mother India is going to do. Sri Aurobindo says that, for example, for a country like India, spirituality is the soul. So until unless we discover our spirituality and make it part and parcel of our daily being, we are not going to become a great nation. We will remain a slave nation, even if we are physically free. We will remain mentally slave. Our soul is not liberated yet. And that's why Sri Aurobindo argues that, and he believed that education should be a path to spiritual evolution. If we want to make our country great, if we want to make our civilization great, our society into a great civilization, a great society, we have to consider education as a path for spiritual evolution for each one of us. And this is where Sri Aurobindo argues, and I quote him: the supreme truths are neither the rigid conclusions of logical reasoning nor the affirmations of creedal statement, but the fruits of the soul's inner experience. So we have to discover this inner experience for each one of us. And true education, therefore, must not just fill the brain with information, it must open the soul to experience, to intuition, to divine wisdom. And this would only come when we integrate spirituality into our education. When we don't limit ourselves to mere facts, to mere information which we receive from our textbooks, but we take risk to take journey into higher dimensions, to move from lower dimensions to higher dimensions of consciousness. Only when we are ready to take this risk, we we will see, as a civilization, all of us will be moving towards a new direction, a new age. And there are many ways through which we can actually integrate these dimensions, these aspects in our education. For example, now, uh, especially in this technological world, in a world where all of us are learning through digital, we have been talking about personalized learning, but personalized learning in a very technological sense, in a very technical sense, that now we have personalized devices available to all of us, and we can have our own personalized, customized learning path. But that is not the personalized learning at all. And this is where Sri Aurobindo offers a solution, and and his idea of every child having a unique subhava. He says that each one of us, each each child has unique subhava, and education should be tailored to develop each child's highest potential. And that is the truly a personalized learning is. It is not about giving all of us a personalized device, and then saying that, oh, now you can have your own personalized learning path. It is about realizing, identifying unique subhava of each individual, and giving him the knowledge and skills to develop his or her highest potential. And this you can only do when you have included all five dimensions into education. If you are lacking in any of those dimensions, the education is not going to be the whole. You won't be able to identify the unique subhava, temperament, or inner nature of that child. That will always be missing. That's why it is very important to think over those five dimensions: the physical, the vital, the mental, the psychic, and the spiritual, and then try to identify, reconfigure, configure, discover the unique subhava of each child, and provide education accordingly. Sri Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo also spoke about uh, having a system of knowledge which integrates science, arts, philosophy, and spirituality. Spirituality and yoga as the core, sadhana as the core. So you have to now think about these disciplines like science, art, philosophy from a yogic perspective, from a sadhana perspective. That when you're learning science, you're learning it is as a sadhana. If you're learning art, you're learning arts as a sadhana. If you're learning philosophy, you're learning philosophy as a yoga and sadhana. So so every single aspect of discipline of our education should be combined with deep spirituality. Only then we will see the large dimensions of the knowledge opening for us, which is currently completely missing in our education. Another way to integrate Sri Aurobindo's ideas, Sri Aurobindo's visions into modern day education is to teach students how to think deeply. It is to teach them about self-inquiry and meditation. And we already see several such attempts being made. So recently we had a study conducted in UK where students in several schools in UK were divided in control group and treatment group. Again, this study was an RCT, randomized controlled trial study, where they wanted to see the impact of chanting, yoga, and meditation on the cognitive abilities of children. So what they did, they divided students into control group and treatment group, and the treatment group students were given interventions in yoga, in meditation, in Sanskrit mantra chanting, and then they looked at the impact of these interventions after 2 or 3 years. It was a longitudinal study. So they looked at the impact of these studies, and they saw that the students who went through these interventions, their minds, their brains were enlarged. They could do their tasks much more in a much more focused manner. They were more cognitively attentive. They did very well in their math, in their very subject like mathematics, in arts, in whatever subjects they were enrolled into. So So integrating these aspects into education also has these benefits, but we're not integrating these yoga, meditation, or self-inquiry for these benefits, but for these values themselves, for these qualities themselves. Otherwise, if you don't have uh, these aspects of self-inquiry, meditation included into education, your education is again going to be very narrow and one-dimensional. Also, Sri Aurobindo, even from his own experience, he he realized that he had hardly learned about his own civilization. Even though he knew a lot about Shakespeare, he had not read anything about Kalidasa. He had not read about Vedic sciences, yoga, Ayurveda, Upanishads, a language like Sanskrit, or a grammar text written by someone like Panini's Ashtadhyayi. He has not read about all that. So Sri Aurobindo also says that one way we can introduce spirituality in our education is also through integrating these disciplines, these texts into our in our schooling system and in our education system. So Vedic sciences, yoga, Ayurveda, Sanskrit should become integral part of our education, and that's when we will see a true flowering of our being, our civilization, our societies. So you can see from the very beginning onwards, Sri Aurobindo has been emphasizing on spirituality aspect of it, and this is a very integral for him, and he gives a lot of examples. For example, now imagine a student who is passionate about music, and in today's system, they might be discouraged from pursuing their passion because it is not practical. But in integral education, the teacher would recognize that this student swabhava, inner nature, is artistic, and would nurture it while also developing their intellectual and spiritual capacities. And this is not a theoretical approach. It is being practiced even today at institutions inspired by Sri Aurobindo, such as Orville and the Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education. So that's why we have a lot of ways to actually reconfigure our education, not being one dimensional or very narrow, and and spirituality. And if India has to grow, if India has to regain its glory, its past heritage, it has to regain its glory through education by including spirituality as the core of of our education system. And again, Sri Aurobindo believed that the India's true identity or India's true destiny is not just to be a modern nation. So, if India's true destiny was to be a modern nation, this modern education would have sufficed. But he says that no, India's true destiny is not just to be a modern nation, but to be the spiritual guide of the world. And for that to happen, we need an education system that uplifts consciousness, not just intellect. And that's where his his emphasis on spirituality, on integrating all those five dimensions into our education system. So now we have discussed, like, from we have till now we have discussed that the kind of impact colonial education had on psyche, and Sri Aurobindo speaks about the impact of colonial education on his psyche, how he had read about everything in the Western civilization but nothing about Indian civilization. He had read about Shakespeare but not Kalidasa. We also see his critique. He criticizes colonial education system as well as modern education system on three very critical points. And those three very critical points were that it trains the intellect but neglects the soul, it separates the knowledge from life, and it produces followers, not thinkers. And then we also saw his approach, like his approach to education in form of integral education. So now Sri Aurobindo's ideas, they now uh, leave us with so many questions. And also say for Sri Aurobindo, he believed that education is not just a means to an end. It is the path to human evolution. If we embrace his vision, we will not just create successful individuals but awakened souls, visionary leaders, and a spiritually conscious society. And this is where lies the importance of Sri Aurobindo's ideas on education and spirituality. That if we want to produce and create successful individuals, as well as awakened souls, visionary leaders, and spiritually conscious society, we have to have all these five dimensions included in education while making spirituality as the core of our education, our, our being, our day-to-day life. So uh, so so now we have almost reached to the end of this session, and I will leave you with one final question. So, what if education was not about preparing for a career, but about preparing for life itself? And Sri Aurobindo has shown us the path. It is up to us to walk on it, walk over it. Thank you so much.